in school today, dear little boy of mine. I learned that Washington never told a lie. I learned that soldiers seldom die. I learned that everybody's free, and that's what the teacher said to me. That's what I learned in school today. That's what I learned in school. What did you learn in school today, dear little boy of mine? What did you learn in school today, dear little boy of mine?
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Mark Carlo. Today my guest is Mr. John Kelly. He's been on the show. I think he's our perennial guest because sometimes, everybody's so busy now on Saturdays.
Except me, I'm always available.
Well, yeah, you're available a lot, which is good. And I don't agree with Mr. Kelly on all things politics, because I think he's more liberal than me on the social issues. But I don't know anybody with more knowledge on city, state, government, federal government than you, just generally speaking. You had some health problems lately. Maybe gives us some insight into the politicized and I think terrible medical system in the United States. What happened?
I've had a really good experience.
Well, that's good.
I had a stroke last February 5th, and I was in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and my stepson is a neurologist there. So I started having symptoms, and they put me in he got me into the ER, and they took me in the hospital, but they couldn't get my blood pressure regulated. So if there's anything I gotta say about it is everybody has, make sure keep your blood pressure under control, because I ignored my doctor's warnings for years, and that was
how high was it?
Well, it was probably when I had a stroke, it was probably 220, 240.
It's very, very high.
And it was running, in the 180s and 180s on a regular basis, and I didn't pay attention to it. So
you weren't on meds or anything?
Well, I was on meds, but the problem was I didn't have symptoms, and so consequently, it was easy to ignore.
No, of course.
And then you wake up one morning and you don't have the use of your right side of your body. It's totally gone, and that's a surprise. And so if you want to avoid that, keep your blood pressure under control and keep it checked. But yeah, it's been a long recovery since February. Like I said, I couldn't move my arm, leg, or anything.
You were in a wheelchair not too long ago.
I was, yes, in a walker, and now I'm on a cane. So making progress. Still in therapy twice a week. So.
No sex scandals for you? Everything you turn on the TV. And that's all we hear about is the new sex scandal, right?
I can't chase a woman fast enough with a cane.
Well, I'm going to give you some. I'm going to throw some observations out there and see what you think. And some of these are going to not go down well with people. The scandals in the entertainment industry surprise me, because I thought, and maybe I'm too cynical, I've known a couple of people from California, a couple semi in the business. And from what you read in popular literature, whether it's Jacqueline Suzanne's Valley of the Dolls in the 60s, etc., sex is part of the entertainment industry. Mm-hmm. And it's well known that there's sexual favors often for roles. And I've heard that in everything from Serpico, who complained one time, the police officer in New York who complained one time that, well, these movies run typically. The producer or director has a girlfriend and she puts him in the movie. So, just inadvertent remarks, etc. So I'm kind of shocked by those scandals, in all honesty.
I think that, it was considered at one time to, okay, not really okay, but considered by some people to be okay, that if a woman wanted to, part she had to put out, basically.
The casting couch.
Yes.
I heard Bob Hope, when I was younger, joke about wanting to be on the casting couch on a certain scene on The Tonight Show.
But I think that, that is a signal that our awareness of what's appropriate is men are no longer in charge of the world.
Well, let's talk about this, though. You know, when I hear people talk about history a lot of times, they're talking about their history from the consciousness of now. I said, these people have no idea what they're even talking about when they're condemning some of these issues regarding slavery maybe, and that was part of the culture and social life back then. Or, you know, and it's almost the same even within our lifetimes, as you're saying. It's changed so much. I'm not saying what any of these guys did was correct or that I would do it, but it was part of the culture.
It was, unfortunately. And I think our awareness is starting to come about. For one thing, women are claiming their own power in this society, which is great. I think that for too long, you know, we've been trained as men to discount women no matter what they say. You know, I've been guilty in the business of discounting what women say without, you know, giving it adequate consideration, and that's wrong. And I learned that actually quite a few years ago. I had a company. I was the CEO of a company. We had 50 employees, and about probably 40 of them were women. You know, and I had to learn a lot of them in management positions. I had to come to learn and to trust their judgment and to listen to them, and that was different experience than I had in a lot of places I worked. And so I made that adaptation probably 15, 20 years ago. But it's still in a lot of cultures, in a lot of parts of our culture, it's normal to ignore when women talk on any subject. And that is not okay. They're half the population.
Well, now I would assume that you would identify as being on the left or a liberal. But what's amazing is so many of these alleged liberals that say they're for all these feminist rights, etc., they're as guilty or more guilty than anyone else that's coming out. Who's the comedian senator? What's his name?
C.K. Lewis.
No, C.K. Lewis is the comedian, but I mean the senator that... what's his name?
Franken.
Yeah, Franken.
Yeah, Al Franken.
Al Franken. I mean, they're both examples of that.
I was really disappointed, you know, Charlie Rose and
Charlie Rose, Al Franken, all those guys say, well, I'm against liberals, I'm for women, and here they've been doing that.
It's really disappointing.
Though,
but I don't think sexual harassment is I think it's a bipartisan issue. I don't think there's...
Well, apparently so.
You know,
and apparently, what's interesting too, it's also a homosexual issue. We're in the homosexual scandals too.
Right.
Homosexual harassment.
I think that...
Or gay is a more common terminology.
I think that most of these guys, like Harvey Weinstein and even Kevin Spacey, you know, I'm sorry to say, are probably bullies, just period, bullies. And it doesn't, I bet you if you looked at Harvey Weinstein's life, you'd find that he had bullied men that worked for him as well. Maybe not sexually harassed them, but acted like a bully. And
which in a way is, I think that's an insight. I think you have an insight that there's a certain sense of cruelty in it.
Yes.
Abusiveness in it.
Absolutely.
And a bully is a bully. And I've learned that throughout my life. I've also learned that if you can fight back, you'd better.
Yes.
Because they won't stop.
That's right.
You know. And
that's right.
So yeah, I think that's a genuine insight. Wherein maybe with the men, it's not sexual, but it's impliedly sexual because it's a kind of sadism or masochism or something.
Yes, and in some instances it is sexual as well. There's let's take prison for example. The people who want to dominate and bully in prison sexually assault other inmates, male or female, or male especially. And when they're out of prison, they don't necessarily assume a gay lifestyle. It's just a matter of dominance. It's a matter of bullying. And so, I
will disagree with you a little bit. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I think the male sex drive is one thing that, for whatever reason, is never intelligently discussed in the media, even though it's sociologically or whatever. And I think men do have a strong sex drive, and the average person knows this on the street,
right? But
it's never acknowledged. Why are people getting pregnant young? A lot of it is a product of that. What's interesting, I hear of all this understanding. well, you got to understand the female. Oh, you got to understand, homosexuality. You have to understand all this. Well, what about the male sex drive? Is that ridiculous to say?
Well, for one thing, Mark.
I'm not saying that. Look,
for one
I'm not saying that I agree on any of that.
No,
any kind of sexual bullying or whatever. But it's I think a biological anatomical fact that nobody wants to talk about.
I think that I don't think that necessarily men have a stronger sex drive than women.
That's another discussion.
But
I think they do. But whatever.
Well, I think they're less choosy. You figure, it's
or no, they're less choosy and they want more of a variety.
Yeah,
right?
well,
they want more variety and they're less choosy.
It's an evolutionary fact that men's best chance of propagating their genes is to get as many women pregnant.
Well, that's social biology.
Possible.
I'm not disagreeing.
Yes,
it's one angle.
And for
social
women,
biology.
it is about securing a mate that will provide for that child till it's adult. That's very different motives, but their sex drive is probably the same.
Well, that's interesting. I don't agree with that, but I think that that's an accepted view. Like I say, the social biological thing. Well, we had a sex scandal locally, which I'm not going. Blake Farenthold is our United States congressional representative, who's been invited on this show 2 or 3 times, like his predecessor, Solomon Ortiz, has never come on. I think irresponsibly, but whatever. I'll speak about him objectively. Mr. Blake Farenthold had sex scandals, and you and I may disagree with this. To me, the allegations were talking, almost office flirtation. I didn't think them particularly serious. But what I did think serious, and I'll give you a second here, I did think it was serious that he used $84,000 of taxpayer money to pay off, because it indicates hypocrisy on his part.
Right.
I don't believe in government spending. I'm a conservative. I don't believe in social welfare programs, except for me. Except
the guy's worth $32 million. And he charges the taxpayers for that.
So how do you see the Blake Farenthold? I think you were the first person that publicized the now infamous picture of him wearing ducky pajamas next to a rather provocatively dressed couple of women.
I was the one.
You were the one that published it. So you and him have animosity, I assume, that goes back a while. And Mr. Farenthold is welcome to come on and give his side of the story on all this, as is anyone who thinks they've been negatively portrayed. But what's your take on it? Do you agree or disagree with it taking the money was bad? Do you agree or disagree that this, in fact, was a rather innocuous flirtation that went on at the office? Or what do you think?
I think that Blake's general attitude is a problem. Let's go back to the fact that, I think the comments he made were inappropriate, but probably not that severe. Of more concern to me was the statement that they made during that was made during those ethics hearings, that he is frequently over drinks to excess, that he's frequently drunk, and that they had to patrol for him to keep him from accosting women at parties.
They said that. They said that.
I think that's consistent with what we know about Blake Farenthold. The fact that original PJ, that pajama party that he was at.
I should have blown it. We have a low budget over here, but I should have blown it up in the background. I try not to take too many cheap shots. But
but he said that that was a fundraiser. It was not a fundraiser. I interviewed.
What was it? Yeah, that's what he was saying. It was a charity event. Or the party line of the right wing is that was a charity event, and then that was a picture taken. I don't.
Right. He said they were.
I don't know.
He said that they were raising money for Big Brothers and Big Sisters. Well, I called the head of Big Brothers and Big Sisters at the time, and he said, "No way." He said, "In fact, we want nothing to do that. We'd have never okayed it if
I
it
don't
was."
think I've never seen him do anything like that. I've never seen.
And they never gave us any money.
Yeah, I've never seen anything like that.
So it was a fraud to start with.
Well, you know, I've been single my whole life, and I hope there's no pictures of me out there because I'm not a congressman. But I don't know, why did he pose for it? It'd be one thing if he'd have been in a club and they would have shown it. But
it was.
How did it get out there?
It was before they ran, and it was printed by. It was originally published on the Crush Girls webpage.
Oh, okay, that's how it got out there.
And so somebody clued me it was there, so I went and looked it up, downloaded it, and it was immediately taken down.
I see.
But there was a number of pictures from that party, including other members at the party. The girls were paddling with a paddle, little S&M bondage kind of thing. Some other stuff that went on.
You know, yeah.
That was not exactly a
interesting
display of good judgment on his part.
No, because even though I've run for politics twice in 20 years or 21 years, but that's just not something I would do. I'd be like too embarrassed or shy or something. You know what I mean?
Common sense.
Yeah, or I mean, you're a professional or whatever. I wouldn't. I guess I wouldn't want to do it either. Mm-hmm. But besides that, so. Is there going to be any downfall on this newest revelation that $84,000 was used from government money to pay off the alleged victims of Blake Farenthold?
The thing that seems to upset the right most is that fact that he used taxpayer money to pay it, and so I think he'll face a challenge in primary, a significant one. And there's probably a good chance he'll decide not to run again, because the current atmosphere about sexual abuse is different than it was in 2015 when the original claims were made.
Well, I'm going to say this, even though I'm not. I think it has the implications of being a witch hunt, wherein allegations are made and we're looking for you. The only thing, though, reason it doesn't in total, it doesn't because most of these men have come out and admitted it.
Right.
And so, even though I think it has the potential for abuse, when you're talking about things that happened 20, 40 years ago, and you're releasing them in the media, before you have it, before the alleged perpetrator of these sex scandals has a chance to respond, it has the potential. It really doesn't seem to have happened yet, wherein anyone innocent has been, accused.
No, I think it's mostly because what we've seen multiple claims against every guy that there's this pattern of behavior, and I think probably if it's a one-time thing, probably nobody's going to make too big of a deal of it unless it's a rape or an actual attack, because most people say he learned his lesson, it's a dumb thing, he acted stupid,
It seems like it's happened mostly in the political and entertainment world. And it's workplace oriented.
Well, I think it's happening. It happens in the workplace. I believe that it's extremely widespread, and that we're just seeing the beginning of it. I do not think it is a majority of men. In fact, I think it's a significant minority of men that act that way.
Let me say something that I mentioned it on this radio show that I often do, and maybe you can come on sometime on 104.9 FM on Friday at 11 a.m.
Sure.
I've worked in firms, like law firms in Houston, and I worked with men and women before, where I wasn't the boss. Now I'm the boss of 4 female employees usually, right? When I worked in these firms, what I found is it was maddening, because these women would want to flirt with you. Mm-hmm. And if you didn't want to flirt with them, they get real mad. Mm-hmm. And I thought it kind of childish really, and it added to the sexual attention. I go, who wants to do that? Sit around here and make these jokes about, So I thought it was very childish. I said, I don't want to do that. I want to work here, and then I don't even. First of all, I was from a blue collar background. We don't even know how to do that.
Right.
We don't have the finesse to do that. Hey, shut up, right? That's how it was, right? You say shut up, or I'll put. You didn't act that way.
I was way too shy.
Well, and shyness is part of it, because again, you were kind of. You could argue that a lot of us from those backgrounds, now they'd say it was an abusive environment or something. Your pop would just hit you, right?
Yeah.
So you were shy. You're not going to do anything too far out of line.
Right.
But so in other words, I'm not so certain these women aren't just sly or propagating it sometimes.
Oh.
But it's a different level.
It's a different thing.
But here's what they would do. They'd get me. Here's what I think they would do. They get mean with you to the point sometimes of getting you fired if you wouldn't engage. And I don't know that they wanted it to go any further even.
Right.
So I think that's obviously that's never going to be actionable. Maybe it's innocuous, but I've seen it. I've seen that also.
Well, I think there's where there's a number of women in this working environment. Some women feel the need to act that behavior out because they've learned that that's how you get ahead. That's how you get along.
Well, I was usually an underling, though. They weren't going to get ahead with me.
Yeah.
When I was working at these places,
but
I was pretty low down on the totem pole. I couldn't have
But some women
Yeah.
measure their worth by their attractiveness to males. Not all women, by far. But so they're constantly flirting and so on. Not necessarily want it to go anyplace, but that behavior is by some women a competitive improper.
Well, here's another thing that I don't think is intelligently discussed, and I've talked to many women. A couple of my employees, they agree with it. We always hear women are just as smart, they're just as strong, they're equal, they're this, they're that. So then, what's the big deal? A lot of times these men didn't. These women could have yelled, they could have walked out of the room, they could have kicked the guy in the private parts or whatever. Instead, now she's a victim. Now, you're just as equal, you're just as smart, you're right there in the workplace, but no, we need protection for you. I think that the conservatives have some degree of validity in that argument.
Well, I think first of all, you have to consider that situations like Harvey Weinstein, women's whole career could be wrecked. There's intimidation about going along, about beyond the immediate events that is threatened by in a situation like that. Where Harvey Weinstein, you could say, fine, you never work in Hollywood.
But supposedly he didn't do that. Did you read that? That these women that were harassed, he didn't fire or he didn't ruin their careers? That's what they said. I don't know.
Well, the question is what position he was in their mind. In other words, here's this guy who they've not met, who's everything in the industry out there, and they're intimidated by his reputation.
I'll tell you something that's related to this that I'm going to speak I'm an attorney, but I don't do practice in that area. The courts have gutted a lot of these rules against discrimination and sex discrimination, age discrimination, etc.
Right.
They passed the laws, and the courts have proceeded to gut the laws.
Right.
So there's only a few good and heroic attorneys even pursuing those cases. If the courts wouldn't have gutted those laws, I think a lot of these women and men for age discrimination would have a little bit more power.
I agree with you.
But I think that's been awful.
Yes.
Just awful.
Yeah. But I think that the fact that when Harvey Weinstein thing broke, the fact that I don't know how many women's 160, I don't remember how many it was tremendous amounts, came out and said, "Me too."
Well, you know what I thought.
That's power. That's power.
Well, let's say this though, and this is I'm a conspiratorialist. Mm-hmm. Maybe I don't believe in Bigfoot. Mm-hmm. Maybe I don't believe in alien abductions, but I'm a basic conspiratorialist. When that LA Lakers older man what was his name? Gosh, I'm not remembering names today. When they took his basketball team away from him. I thought that as a hit. I said, somebody wants his basketball team. I'm always looking behind the scenes.
Oh, about the racist comments by the
Those were pretty innocuous. He was a different generation. He was a pretty good person. I thought that was terrible. And I see that every once in a while. And I thought that about Harvey Weinstein. He goes, if somebody went this man's, I don't know, does he own that studio? Or somebody went his studio? Is that what's going on?
I don't think so.
I think there's a lot of that, though. Instead of shooting someone, you destroy their reputation. Mm-hmm. You take away what they own through various ways. That's the way of power. I think that's the way of power and money. And I don't care if it's the Bill Clinton sex scandal, Monica Lewinsky, to me to this day was a non-issue, but for political reasons they wanted him out. Of course, he had a history of other sexual abuse.
I mean,
but I think a lot of times that's what's going on in the world of influence, power, and money. There's character assassination and you're set up.
Certainly, I think with the first accuser of Al Franken, there's some question. She's been on the Hannity show a number of times. She's a right-winger. There was, the photograph. He wasn't actually groping her breasts, and she said he was.
And he was a comedian. At that time, he's doing skits.
Was it inappropriate? Probably. Now the multiple complaints of him putting his hand on a girl's butt when they were taking photographs he admitted it's probably true. He admitted it's true, and that was inappropriate. Does it rank with Harvey Weinstein? No. Does it rank with Louis C.K.? No. Or even Kevin Spacey? No. Those are all assaults. There's a difference, that the photograph that was the main girl after Miss Tweeden that made a comment, said, oh yeah, he groped me at the state fair, he groped my butt when we had a picture taken. They showed the picture, she's got a big grin on her face. It's kind of hard to...
I think the court started that, what they say uninvited.
Yeah.
Uninvited sexual advances, which that's where it gets very complicated.
Yes. My own opinion is that there is no reason to make a sexual advance without an invitation. There is a lot.
What's an invitation though? A smile? Like I say, these flirtatious remarks. Don't you look good? Whatever they say.
There's a lot. I mean, I don't know, Mark. I don't think I've never had a misunderstanding with a woman about whether she wanted me to approach her or not. I think women.
I have.
I think women make it obvious that they're.
Well, I don't know. I think I have. I mean, in terms at least. Then I don't know. They have all these games and they play hard to get. There's all this other stuff. Oh yeah.
Right.
They want you to ask them out. You ask them out. Oh well, not. And then they're this week, and then they play hard to get. Then you don't ask them out. They get mad. I don't know. There's all sorts of games going on. I don't know. Right.
One thing is, I just always made it a rule. Not to ask a subordinate or somebody's,
could get you into trouble.
Yeah,
it could get you in trouble. But some of these career-driven people, a lot of times that's all they meet is people on the job.
I know.
And I don't know. A lot of these people were married, which is a whole nother angle, right? So that's a whole nother angle. And I don't know if this guy from the Today Show was married or not. I don't know.
Yes,
I assume he was.
It was very abusive. His behavior was very abusive.
Supposedly he was real bad.
Yes.
And he acts. Well, I won't get into that, but I have found that many of these men do not seem to have the quality of. They don't have a real masculine psyche in the way they act or speak. That seems to be very common with a lot of these men that are accused of this. I don't know what's going on there. My brother commented, he said he thinks they're men that never grew up. I don't know.
I think, there's something to do with having a lot of money, a lot of power, that seems to breed feelings of immunity that you can do whatever you want.
Look at the Kennedys. Look at Ted Kennedy.
Right.
The liberal hero.
Robert,
and I'm not talking about just Chappaquiddick.
JFK.
JFK?
was way worse. I mean, read Cy Hirsch's A Dark
Excellent.
Side of
Excellent.
Camelot.
Excellent work.
Just every day he almost brought
Excellent.
prostitutes and girlfriends into the White House.
And there's the whole Marilyn Monroe scandal, supposedly how she was used. She was kind of innocent.
That was
emotionally
minor compared to what else he did. Really.
I know.
And but I think the day of that being acceptable behavior is over. Those women obviously were cooperative. That was different than sexual harassment.
Well, I don't know that it's not the same thing. Again, John F. Kennedy was in a position of power and money and influence, and they thought they would lose their job or they could benefit.
I think that you have a point when you say that here's a man who has a position of power and he uses it over a girl, that the girl is not held accountable for being a participant. That's a very that has very bad implications. But I think, when you say, like Al Franken has a position of power because he's famous, but he doesn't control them. He doesn't control their career. He doesn't control their livelihood. That's something different. I don't think that's different.
You know who I was very disappointed by, because I think he's so brilliant, even though he gets a little bit preachy. Louis C.K.
Yes.
This man is a brilliant man. Those shows were extraordinary. Those
Yes.
couple of cable shows he did, they were
Kevin
extraordinary.
Spacey is a brilliant man in terms of acting.
Well, acting, but
but
Louis C.K. was writer, etc. He did those shows. They were like mini movies. I was kind of, and then you know what else? God forbid I say this. I don't want to talk about this too much, but what a bizarre act! What a bizarre thing he's doing. Doing that in front of these women.
Yes.
What kind of bizarre?
Yeah. Like
it's kind of weird.
Like, where didn't you have a mother? Who taught you that was a good way to get a girl? I mean,
well,
that's
or even to find sexual satisfaction. That's how I find sexual satisfaction, by doing something.
Right.
That's a bizarre thing, right? That's bizarre. Well, maybe then the other thing is, some of these men, they say, okay, I'm in sex treatment. It's like I found Jesus. I found sex treatment. Now I'm cured. Now don't bother me anymore, right? Now they've developed that for a long time. I get in trouble. I go to drug treatment. Yeah. I go to Well, maybe it's not bad.
There's a difference between addicted to drugs and supposedly addicted to sex. You may be obsessed with sex, but you're not addicted to sex.
But that's not necessarily agreed to by everyone, because they do claim now men are addicted to sex. They claim that, or men or women.
There's no proof of that. There's no scientific proof of that.
And some people dispute addiction to alcohol too. Some people dispute that. No, they dispute it's a disease, not that it's an addiction. Yeah, they do.
I think that when you're really, simply a matter of knowing what's right and what's wrong. You know that you're wrong when it comes to coercing somebody, when it comes to taking advantage of somebody.
Well stated, yes.
When it comes to forcing yourself on somebody. I saw the best thing on Facebook. It said, compared sexual harassment to having a cup of tea. You don't force somebody to drink the tea if they don't want it. You don't force it down their throat.
Well, let me tell you something.
Somebody says,
no,
have a cup of tea.
There are people. There are people like that. I remember a friend of mine. He was a good person, I think, but he wanted you to smoke marijuana with him. Mm-hmm. And despite to this day, I think pretty well of him. That's what he wanted. And I remember one acquaintance or mutual acquaintance got in trouble with drugs because of that. Mm-hmm. So. In other words, I think that's fairly common that people do that, isn't it?
I think people have.
I think
people are susceptible to wanting to belong, to wanting to be
Absolutely.
Part of.
Absolutely.
But the difference is that adults don't say no. If you've got a stable emotional life, and you're fairly well grounded, you can say no. I think.
But you know, I think you're I'm sorry for interrupting you. I think
No.
what you're stating is very well stated, but
The problem is if you're not well grounded.
did you ever read these some of the advanced sociology books, like how they turn a woman into a prostitute?
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty ugly.
Yeah.
Very ugly,
Yes.
and it's very astute. They know a lot about the human psyche,
Yeah.
dependency,
It's
etc.
much like a Stockholm effect, where the prisoners become identify with their captors more than they do with other.
Right. So when you're saying that's very good too.
Yeah.
So everything's not totally innocent. When you're saying someone could say no, if you put them in an embarrassing situation, a dependency situation, a psychological confining situation, it's also related to these cults.
Right.
Before you know it, you see some very, just awful
Right.
things. The only thing I could say is about some of these. They call them pimps, I guess. The way they state it makes it sound uglier. Maybe they're more frank than some of these cults.
I think there is an inherent deficit in that person's ability to make decisions for themselves. Usually they came from a fairly authoritarian background where they didn't have choices, where they were told what to do. They weren't encouraged to make choices for themselves.
Or question.
Or question.
Debate, right.
And they come out of those type of environments, and they're very susceptible to that. Look at the whole Trump supporter thing. People who know he's lying, who say we don't care. We don't care.
Well, isn't that the political issue? One of the reasons that I may not be viable politically is I look at every issue and I try to make a determination on the issue instead of a political party line.
Right.
One of the reasons I'm not, for example, a Blake Farenthold fan is I think he just followed the party line.
Absolutely.
I think he knew it, he understood it, but he's just a party liner. You listen to Mr. Farenthold, you're not going to learn too much generally.
Right. And it's, in fact, a Tea Party line is what he follows, the far right.
Is that right? I
yeah.
don't get into it
Very
that much.
much,
I mean,
very
I
much
don't know.
so.
I mean, they've redefined what a Republican is. I remember the guys like Lindsay,
Yeah.
Rockefeller.
He's not
These
a
li-
Bob
I remember
Dole or,
these Republicans, right?
Main Street Republicans, we call them.
Well, I think those were. I think Lindsay and Rockefeller were liberal Republicans. They used to have them. Do they have them anymore?
Not really. They were socially liberal and fiscally conservative. But, that started changing when we started injecting politics into religion and combining the two. Back in about the late 70s, early 80s, they started injecting the social issues. First of all, understand that Carlo masterminded this thing. Now he regrets it. But he did three things. He was determined to make a permanent Republican majority. And so consequently, they did gerrymandering, okay, which was makes it impossible for a liberal Republican to win a district because they're solidly Republican. There isn't many mixed districts anymore. Second of all, social issues made social issues the big issue. Abortion, gay rights. That was because the Republicans couldn't depend on, couldn't expand their base. They were going to lose voters demographically. They looked at the demographics in the country, and they said, wow, there's going to be more women and minorities and stuff than there is, Republicans, last bastion of the white male. We got to do something. So let's make social issues an issue. And so he made social issues an issue. The third was unlimited campaign finance. And so you have the Koch brothers, or the guy in Vegas, what's his name, Adelson, who are willing to bankroll the maniac who agrees with them. you know.
Well, and then the right always talks about Soros, and I don't know.
Yeah, they've got a great fear of Soros, but this is ridiculous. You know, you really look at the right wingers have a tremendous number of people who are only interested in their pocketbooks and their radical right-wing views, and they'll pay any amount of money to elect people. So you wind up with the Adelson Cadillac candidate or the Koch brother candidate, you know, not the Republican candidate, but the extremist who is bankrolled by these guys to out-finance everybody else when it comes to an election. And now you look at like Jeff Flake and Bob Corker. They're not going to get reelected because of gerrymandering, you know. You have a totally Republican district. It's like Blake. Blake could not get elected in any district that had a reasonable chance of going either way. Couldn't do it. But in the district, the way it's laid out, a strongly all Republican district, it's like 53-54% Republican, he will get elected because he's a Republican, not because he has the best idea, because he's the best financed and can put his name out there in front of everybody else, so he'll get the election. And no matter what his views. And a liberal Republican, like we used to see with Rockefeller and so forth, has no chance today because of the social issues injected into the race. So,
whose fault? But I would disagree with you slightly on the social issues. To me, isn't the Democrats who abandoned the economic issues and their working class base?
Absolutely. The Democrats when the Republicans looked at the demographics and said, look, we've got to get social issues as the main thing to attract those working class voters, otherwise we're going to be out of power. The Democrats reacted by saying, well, let's get all the minorities, etc., women, blacks, Hispanics, we'll line up enough minorities to counter that, which was a failing strategy. In the process, they forgot they represented the working class white guy, and that was,
or even the working class Hispanic.
Well, yeah, exactly, and that's what killed him with Trump. That's how Trump got elected.
I know more than one. I know many Hispanics that voted for Trump.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Well, it's not amazing. Let me tell you, John. I voted for Trump because Hillary, to me, was a warmonger.
I didn't vote for Hillary.
And economically, she was just as more conservative than Trump.
She was a neoliberal. I didn't vote for her.
So now let me tell you something.
I didn't vote for Trump either, though.
He didn't campaign on cutting taxes for the rich. He didn't campaign on that. Now that he's done it, I said, I would never vote for him again.
Well, he's a complete liar.
That was just, I mean, this budget, I hate to say this, I certainly don't hope that it's the final nail in the coffin of the American dream, but I kind of think it is.
If they pass it, and it's very bad. In spite of that, the what he's done with the executive actions in the various offices have wrecked him for years to come. Department of State has lost thousands of people, good people, the senior positions. EPA, thousands of positions. People said, I'm not, sticking around. There's no career here because the science is out the window. And the EPA, the science is out the window. So, people are leaving in droves in government service, and they'll be very, very hard to replace without taking a generation to replace them.
I haven't read that statistically. Assuming that's true, I will state that some of that started with Reagan, wherein you don't necessarily put the head of one of these, you don't put the head of the EPA someone who really believes in environmental protection. Yeah. You don't, that's a trick that started under him. I go, well, that's
right.
You don't believe in environmental protection, and they're making you the president of it, whatever. So that, I think that started under his administration. Yeah, I'm very despondent about, because I always boil it down to the homeless issue. And I know you and I have discussed it many times, and it's a complicated issue, but I keep saying, how many homeless? I mean, if it's that easy in America, if it's that easy to make a living, if it's that easy psychologically on people, why do we have this issue that you and I remember when we were kids? You just didn't have it.
They've just done away continuously, starting with Bill Clinton, by the way, with the safety net. Clinton did welfare reform, and he also did mandatory sentencing, which was a horrific policy. He did NAFTA, which gutted the Midwest. Quite frankly, it just gutted the Midwest. People in Texas don't realize what NAFTA did because they felt positive effects of it. But go back to my home state of Michigan. Go back to your home state. Look at all the empty buildings and factories and so on and so forth, the lost population. Those are the people who voted for Trump. And that's because the Democrats deserted him.
It is, and Trump did at least have an idea. He said, look.
He lied to him.
He did say, look, we're going to try to bring back jobs to manufacturing, et cetera, productivity, which, look, at least he said it.
Well, the problem was, the problem was Trump has never been truthful his whole life. Why anybody would believe him, during the last election is a mystery to me.
Well, he was stating things rather bluntly.
That's what they liked. They liked.
Well, he was stating things rather bluntly, and I would say this: when you lined him up with those other Republican candidates, he did win every debate that I saw. Mm-hmm. Also, I said, well, the guy did do something. He was he did build buildings. He was productive. When we had so many other people up there that were just lifetime politicians.
He actually hasn't built that many buildings.
Well,
he lends his name to them.
Well, he leases. Yeah, my understanding is he's a very good marketer. You're right. I think a lot of times it's the name he's somehow leasing. That's true too.
Because his own developments, he's filed bankruptcy 6 times.
Well, let me say something though. I'm going to be devil. Just speaking though. You must admit unemployment is relatively low compared to the way it has been. We still have low inflation, and he hasn't started any new wars yet, even though he hasn't pulled us out. President Obama made us these peacetime offers. He didn't really do it.
He's really trying to start a war with Iran and Korea. Really, his contribution in the economy, the trajectory we're on now with the economy was the same as what it was before Obama left office. It has not changed. It's the same trajectory as it was before. Now,
well, I'll agree with you on that.
The thing that's helped the stock market is Trump's promise of tax relief for investors. Now, corporations are sitting on mounds of cash. It's not the problem that they don't have the cash to invest.
That's true.
They basically have been promised that they'll get the stock market. The stockholders are going to get great rewards from the reduced tax rates. So that's what the stock market is bet on. It's disconnected from the economy. There is no increased demand, Mark, which will actually lift it. If you gave that money to middle class people, working class people, they would immediately spend it, that's right, because they need to, and it would stimulate the economy.
Well, I agree with that, but what about the argument that our corporations are taxed at like a higher level than almost every other country in the world?
Quite frankly,
that's what they always say that. Ours is 35, and then every other country is 20%.
No, they always say that.
True?
It's a lie. Yes, it's a lie. It's like most everything else Trump says. It's an out-and-out lie. We're somewhere in the middle. We're not. We don't overtax our corporations. It's BS, quite frankly. And he just repeats the same thing over and over and
Well,
over again.
but-
It's just the same with Hitler. Just repeat it enough, and
Well, but
everybody will believe
everybody
it.
does that. I mean, that's the power of the media. They'll get a story, and they'll repeat it, or a major story they'll only say it once, and then later somebody will come. Well, look, you didn't cover that. Oh yeah, we covered it in the back pages of the New York Times,
Right.
or whatever. Well, turning to some of the.
But wait a minute. Wait till if the tax bill for some reason fails coming out of conference. If it doesn't make it, they can't resolve the conference committee, and watch the stock market. It's going to fall like a rock, because this current boom is based on anticipation of the tax break.
Well, I guess we'll live to see that. I don't entirely agree with you. I do think there's a certain trajectory under the Obama administration, which so basically you are contradicting yourself a little bit. You're saying it's a trajectory from the Obama administration, but then this boom is based upon the future.
That has continued. This is the longest boom in history, and it's also way over the top. Michael Bloomberg was asked, why do you think the stock market is so high? He said, I have no idea. He said there are no fundamentals to support it.
Well, the price earnings ratio, and I'll try to explain this,
Right.
even though I'm not an economist. The price earnings ratio, which is the percentage that if a share is earning $5 a share, a 7 PE ratio means it's selling for $35.
Right. Profits
So
versus
the
earnings.
price earnings ratios are through the roof.
Yes. They're way out of whack.
And let me tell you something. Someone who's got burnt in the stock market real bad in 2008, they're not getting me back in.
Right.
I don't. First of all, the big accounting firms that went under, was it Arthur Andersen through fraud,
Yes.
and then fraud in the ratings for even bonds. There's so much fraud. Look, God bless anybody in the market,
Right.
and I hope you do very well. But I'm not buying it.
We have everything.
I'm not buying it.
We have most everything in foreign investments, cash, and gold. Quite frankly,
it's
going to fall out. The bottom's going to fall.
I hope not, and I hope we're wrong. But let me talk about something else that I think President Trump has been successful in. They say the number of illegals is markedly reduced just by his threats. And
Sure.
So is that not good?
I guess so.
Okay. So
I think that we have to draft a comprehensive immigration policy that makes sense for the people who are already here and the DACA people, and to limit the problems with other countries. Most of the illegal immigration right now is coming from Honduras and Guatemala and El Salvador. We have a long history on screwing those countries up, including changing their governments to our whim, in putting wars on them that they didn't foment, just causing tremendous problems.
that's true.
Honduras is like the murder capital of the world.
Well, that's very true. But it's also true that, again, the citizens are the victims. A lot of those people, Mexico is not like a lot of those countries. There's some rough, I represented them.
Right.
There's some real gangsters coming up
Well,
down there, man.
Yes.
So when Trump said that had a validity of truth. These were not, a lot of times they're not poor, people from Mexico trying to earn a living in the fields. A lot of them are from further south, and a lot of them are real gangsters.
And the problem has been, you want to look at the problem, let's go back to 1996 and NAFTA. Because in 1996, there was 2.3 million illegals in the country, okay? From 1996 to 2000, that number increased to 10 million people. Why? Well, NAFTA was harmful not only to the Midwest and the Rust Belt, it was also harmful to the Mexican people. their poverty rate went from 25% to 50%, because it allowed they did away with communal property in NAFTA. There was a lot of small Mexican farmers that operated the communal farm with the rest of the people in their village, and they jointly owned the land. For them to join NAFTA, they had to remove that from their constitution and make that illegal. So they were all given land separately. Okay, you 50 people own all this land. Now you own this plot, you own that plot, you own that plot. Then after NAFTA, the first year, Monsanto went down and dumped tons of corn and killed the corn market in Mexico. And those people then the next year had to borrow money to buy seed, had to buy, and become indebted. And by the third year, they're off the land, they're broke, and they're forced into the labor market. And so they go to the, what's it called? The Mexican factories.
What were they calling those things?
Maquiladoras.
Yeah, I don't quite get the name.
Along the border, and they say, well, all these jobs are supposed to be here. Why don't you hire me? Well, we'll hire your 15-year-old daughter. We'll hire your wife. We won't hire you because you'll want to organize. You'll want better wages. We can dominate them. So all these young men were thrown into the unemployment market. And two things happened. One was immigrate to the United States. The second was the cartels were hiring cheap labor to kill people. So we had an explosion of cartel activity and of illegal immigration between 1996 and 2000, totally brought on by NAFTA.
Well, when they passed NAFTA, related to what you're saying, I didn't predict all that. But one thing I predicted, I said, well, I guess they gave up on the drug war, right? Mm-hmm. Because under NAFTA, it's going to be wide open. Yeah. They're not going to be able to patrol all these trucks and all that.
Right.
And that does seem to be the drug problems are off the table in the United States of America. I don't know what's going to. I don't see anybody intelligently raising that issue or the homeless issue.
No.
And the politicians don't seem to want to address that. That seems to be a hot topic, an ignored topic.
Let's face it, the people with drug companies that were making huge contributions were the ones that were causing the problem. Mexican cartels distributing heroin are kind of secondary to our own docs and pharmacies.
And then talking about my conspiracy theories too, you could say it's a conspiracy or not, but of course, with the war in Afghanistan driven largely by the poppy fields. And
I don't know about that, but certainly the paying kickbacks to doctors to prescribe opioids was an incentive for doctors to overprescribe.
And then the latest thing though is the latest arguments is that now it's a great deal of harm from the restrictions on the doctors in the prescriptions of opioids because of the number of people that are in pain and need these drugs.
Let me tell you, Mark, about a personal experience. I stuck this thumb into a table saw a couple years ago. Don't do that, please.
Right. I see the scar.
Yeah, I see the scar. I lost my feeling in the top part of my thumb. Anyway, I went into the hospital. I won't say which one. And I went to the ER room, and they said, "Oh," doctor says, "looks like you need some for pain." I said, "Well, what do you have in mind? I'm a recovering alcoholic." He said, "Oxycodone." I said, No, I'm a recovering alcoholic. What other choices do you have? Well, we could just shoot it up a lidocaine, you wouldn't feel a thing. I said, "Do that." And so then after they did that, sewed it up, the shift changed, and another doctor came in and said, "Well, you're going to need something to take home for pain." I said, "Well, I'm kind of wise by this point." I said, "Well, what do you have in mind?" He says, "Hydrocodone." And I said, No, I can't do that.
They were pushing it.
I said, what are my alternatives? They said, "How about extra strength Tylenol?" I said, "That'd be good." So they want to give me opioids, a prescription for opioids.
So they were kind of, maybe there must have been a profitability factor.
Sure.
John Kelly, thank you very much for coming on. Voices of the Coastal Bend, as always, pleasure having you on.
I've enjoyed that.
Thank you for watching.
Learn in school today, dear little boy of mine. I learned that Washington never told a lie. I learned that soldiers seldom die. I learned that everybody's free, and that's what the teacher said to me. That's what I learned in school today. That's what I learned in school. What did you learn in school today, dear little boy of mine? What did you learn in school today, dear little boy of mine? I learned that policemen are my friends. I learned that